Hello and welcome. My name is Steve Rowan. I am a managing partner at RSR Research. I'm joined today by one of my other partners, Brian Kilcourse. Both of us have been with this company since 2007 when we had a crazy idea that nearly 20 years later turned out to be a pretty good idea. So what we're going to do today is something of an annual tradition for us, and that is share some of the most relevant and interesting findings from a full year's worth of research and talk about how those findings have informed what we'll be doing in the following year. So this is 2023 in review and what's next for 2024. Before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping here. Uh, you may ask questions at any time by using the questions pane. We will try to get to a couple of the questions if time permits here in the live session. Any that we do not get to, we promise to respond to via email. Both these slides that we'll be sharing here today and the recording of this session will be available next week. So if you've registered and you can hear my voice, no need to ask us, will you be receiving these slides? Absolutely, you will be receiving these slides. And absolutely, you'll be receiving a link to the recording itself. We invite you to share it with everyone, whether they registered or not. We're not in the business of collecting names. We're in the business of sharing insight. So be on the lookout for those next week. I can see the list of folks here. We know many of your names. For those of you who this is your first interaction, I mentioned that we started this company in 2007, and we started for a very simple reason. As all former retail practitioners, we knew that the retail research landscape was covered when it comes to technologist versus technologist. The Forresters and Gartners of the world, who we're all very familiar with, do a very nice job of comparing one technology set versus another and then ranking it on a wave or a quadrant or whatever their particular rate of evaluation is. Everyone understands that model, and they do a great job. But what we wanted in our retail careers that did not seem readily available was market intelligence. Plenty of competitive intelligence, not a lot of market intelligence. So we came up with this idea of what would happen if we, as retailers, people who understand the industry that we're serving, survey retailers a couple times a year on a topic by topic basis, purely on research issues. A store report every year, a merchandising report every year, a loss prevention or supply chain report every year. We narrowly focus a line of inquiry in that topic. We present those findings based on what are the challenges that retailers face on any one of the issues at hand, how are the best able to convert those challenges into opportunities, and ultimately, what are the technologies that they're budgeting for to help them get past those challenges? What if we presented that information in an objective way and tied together some of our own real world, hard-won opinions to give pragmatic advice on what we think retailers should do in the short term on that one particular topic? And it turned out to be a pretty nice idea. We publish everything that we do. We do anywhere between 8 and 10 benchmarks a year, and we have been since 2007. So we've built a pretty nice bed of research data to draw from. We make that all available on our website. We make it available for free to everyone. And then what we do with all of that information is the other half of our business. That is where we advise retailers on a one-to-one basis, if they so desire, on what they could do next. We do the same thing with technologists and help align their messaging so that they're speaking what we call the language of retail. So that's what we do. That's who we are. And we've been doing it for a while. So what are we here to do today? I mentioned at the top that we're here to share some of our findings from 2023. And this is really a reality check, because as we all prepare at the end of the year to head to the NRF event in New York in January, instability around retail and all things retail seems to be the talk of our industry. If someone were to only read the headlines, the situation would seem pretty grim, that stores are in terrible trouble, that employees are impossible to hire, to retain, that customers are incredibly dissatisfied, and that theft and loss and violence are running amok in the streets. There's an awful lot of ink being spilled about how digital commerce is continuing its march towards dominance, and that the supply chain is still in disarray from the events of a few years ago. Certainly that the amount of returns that retailers are being asked to process both online and in stores is becoming an insurmountable challenge for them, that their ability to reach people and market to people and reach them in ways that are relevant to their lives are a great unknown, that folks are just sort of throwing money at marketing ideas and not really knowing what works. And certainly, all the while that all of this doom and gloom is going on, there's a tremendous amount of both certainty and uncertainty about how artificial intelligence will affect every aspect of the retail ecosystem. But our job as pragmatic people is to survey retailers on what they say. And as you might imagine, the actual picture that they paint is one that's grounded in pragmatism, and a lot more about day-to-day operations and putting one foot in front of the other and trying to wade through these issues bird by bird, as the saying goes. So the first thing that we're going to do here is hand the mic over to my partner, Brian, and he's going to share with you some of the findings from our most recent survey. This hasn't even been written up yet. These are early findings, and it's in regards to the store. So Brian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. The store is an endless point of discussion among retailers and prognosticators, and of course, the popular press. And as Steve mentioned, there's been a whole lot of drum beating for years about the demise of the store, to the point where even 5 or 6 years ago, people were talking about a retail apocalypse, the end of stores, right? As it turns out, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, about 85% of all US sales, at least, still go through a store, still are rung up in a store. Now, what that number doesn't tell us is how much of that experience begins in the digital domain. We have some clues to that. For example, Google last year published a number: 63% of all shopping journeys begin in the digital domain. And that's believable for me and for others who use the iPhone as the starting point for all of their searches, even when they fully intend to go to the store. So the store isn't gone. The store isn't going away. We also have done some consumer direct research. And guess what consumers tell us? They like to go to stores. They don't view stores in the same way that they used to. They think of stores in the context of their digitally enabled lives, but they still view going to the store as a valuable activity. And retailers get that. You can see in these numbers, and Steve mentioned that this is brand new. We haven't even published the report yet. By the way, it's due in February if you want to take a look at your email around that time. But retailers tell us that the store remains the primary strategy for the company's growth. 61% strongly agree with that, and another 29% agree somewhat with that. So that's a big, strong positive for the stores. At the same time, retailers understand that the store should be more fun and easier for consumers. And the consumers still love to browse the stores, but the majority of shopping journeys begin online, even when the journey is completed in the store. Of course, what that means is that the volume of buy online, pickup and return in the stores is all happening, it's growing, and that is eroding profitability. And that's driving a lot of the technology decisions that retailers are making about automating non-selling processes. And finally, and very importantly, almost, 90% or close to 90% of all retailers agree with the statement that stores are part of a selling environment that integrates the digital and physical customer experiences. Now, this is an interesting piece because consumers tell us exactly the same thing. Consumers don't see differences between channels as we describe them. They view it as part of a selling or a shopping experience, and what they experience in the digital, they expect in the physical. And what they see in the physical, they also want to be able to see in the digital. They see these things as integrated. And interestingly, consumers don't give retailers a tremendous amount of credit if they've done this well. They give them a lot of demerits if they've done it poorly. Now, I want to just mention that one of the things we do in our research is we study overtly on the business use cases that drive the adoption of technology. We use a methodology that we call the BOOT. It's a proprietary methodology. And it starts with the business challenges. These are the external things that are pushing retailers to make decisions about technology. Then the opportunities that come from those challenges, the organizational inhibitors that prevent them from moving faster, and finally, the technologies that enable them to address the challenge or to seize the opportunity. These all result in something we call bootstrap recommendations. And the bootstrap recommendations are based on what overperforming retailers that we call retail winners are doing in a particular area. So quite simply, what we do is we harvest all the behaviors of retail winners and we turn those into recommendations for everybody else. Now, it's surprisingly consistent. that overperformers, retail winners, don't just do the things that others do better. They do that certainly, but they also do different things. And one of the things that they really focus on is what's important to the consumer, where average and underperformers tend to focus on internal controls, things, the cost of doing business, those kinds of things, maintaining their labor ratios, all of those, let's call them operational challenges. Retail winners are relentlessly focused on what the consumer wants. And so we expect that as we go through this data, that we're going to find all kinds of interesting differences between winners and everybody else. We have another example from another study. This happens to be my favorite chart of the entire year. We've heard a tremendous amount about the supply chain, of course. It's been the focus of a lot of popular press, a lot of government action, a lot of hand-wringing, particularly at the end of the pandemic in 2022 and right into 2023. But retailers are really, really focused on it for all the obvious reasons. I just wanted to share these ones with you because it shows how much their awareness of certain capabilities has come into the forefront in just 2 years. So for example, retailers place a high value on getting alerts on unexpected supply shortages that could impact the supplier's ability to meet performance targets. 40% of retailers in 2021 said that that was important. It's now 73%, almost half, almost twice as much. It's really a remarkable shift. Quicker identification of disruptions, alerts on critical inventory situations anywhere from within the supply chain. Of course, visibility into available to sell inventory anywhere within the enterprise. That's important not just to be able to commit to sell something to consumers, but also to know where that inventory is as it travels towards the point of demand. And finally, visibility into supply chain inefficiencies. All of these have risen in importance in retailers' mindsets. Supply chain, of course, is the center of a tremendous amount of activity and technology investment, but retail winners understand that we're moving away from supply chains and more towards supply networks. And there are tremendous implications to that. The bottom line for it is that decision cycles are rapidly increasing, and the number of sources for any particular piece of inventory are metastasizing across the entire globe. So it's really a fascinating time to be looking at the supply chain, the supply network. On to the next one, Steve. We talk about relevance all the time. Relevance is the word we use instead of personalization. We have been studying this issue since 2010, certainly. The old notion of personalization or one-to-one retailing was really started back in the 1990s by Peppers and Rogers. There was a book that they put out that was quite famous. But as it turns out, neither consumers nor retailers want one-to-one in most cases. What they want is relevance. Consumers want solutions that are relevant to their lifestyle need, and retailers want to deliver that. So here's a chance for you to see what consumers say and what retailers say about very similar issues. In the consumer study that we did last year, which had 1,139 respondents, this is what they told us. Number one, that they wanted the retailer to be able to notify them about products and services that they might be interested in. Very interesting. Second one on that list, who knows enough about me to identify the products I might like, knows enough about me to identify ways that I like to shop, knows enough about me to make offers based on shoppers like me, knows enough about me to make offers specific to just me. That's that personalization notion that we just talked about. And make offers to me based on what I actually buy and not what I want to buy. All of these things are important to consumers. They're exciting. Retailers certainly get it. Look at these numbers. These are very important technologies to implement a customer-centered strategy. The first one is a little bit of a surprise to us, and that's that the e-commerce integrated platform needs to be modernized. It needs to be brought into this notion of an omnichannel selling environment. But secondarily, right underneath it is customer relationship management systems. There's certainly not a new technology, but there have been tremendous innovations in how those systems can be used to target value offers to the best customers. Analytic tools for customer segmentation. And here's the flip side of e-commerce. Point of sale integrated into an overall selling environment. Now, we used to joke that point of sale systems were in most cases old enough to vote legally. We can see now that retailers are thinking about point of sale not as an island of technology in a store, but as part of an integrated selling environment. And finally, of course, customer order management and fulfillment capabilities in the store. This gets to buy online, pick up in store, and all of those related activities. These became very, very real during the pandemic, and consumers liked it. They continue to use it. So there's a tremendous amount of synergy between what consumers want and what retailers are investing in to deliver. And we like that. It means that we need to study it more, and we certainly will in 2024. Let's go to another one, Steve. We talk a lot about next generation analytics. That's our euphemism for AI-enabled analytics. AI is a powerful tool that will help you to sift through masses of unstructured data to come up with statistically significant relationships between them. I was on a webinar the other day where somebody jokingly called this good old-fashioned AI. We're not talking about generative AI here. We're just talking about good old-fashioned AI. How fast the worm turns, right? But anyway, the point is that AI does enable you, the retailer, to analyze these huge data sets of unstructured data in a way that will help you to glean insights from them. It's a tremendously powerful tool, and it's changing a lot of things in retail. But here are some of the things that new generation analytics are helping retailers to do. Kind of an overall catch-all is to be able to combine geographic and demographic data to make better business decisions. This is where location-aware data becomes very, very important. So for example, what do we mean by this? It might be traffic patterns of consumers around certain stores, or it might mean the flow of the supply chain as goods go to market. All of these things and everything in between. Retailers are paying very close attention to these new types of data. Cross-channel market analyses, supply chain network design, workforce management, delivery optimization, and on down the line. You can see that these new generation of analytics are considered to be very, very important for retailers going forward. Now, there's good news and bad news in this storyline. The good news is that the technology is actually there. It can do all of these things. The bad news is perhaps that it takes a level of expertise having to do with the data science that most retailers don't have advantages, don't have the availability to. The good news to respond to that is that many technology providers are bringing very, very advanced data modeling capabilities down to earth so that business people like me can take advantage of them and glean insights from them without having an advanced degree in data science. Pretty exciting times. Very, very fast moving train. I can tell you that 5 years ago, we weren't talking about most of these issues, but now they're hot and they're very important. So that's a look at some of the 2023 highlights. There are many, many more. Steve mentioned we do between 8 and 10 studies every single year. And we can talk about these things for hours, but what we really want to do is talk about what to expect in 2024. So Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean that when you think about what we did in 2023, I think we did 10 benchmark reports. Each one had somewhere between 25 and 30 charts. Those are just 4 that we thought were really instructive, not only for readers, but also to give us an idea of where we wanted to point our direction for 2024. So in a moment, we'll share the full calendar with you of the individual reports, the time that the surveys will launch, and the times the reports will come out. But one of the themes that probably should not come as a surprise is that the evolution of the store will be an enormous focus for us. We have multiple reports that are going to study their own individual topic, like workforce or returns, which is, by the way, a topic that we've never studied in isolation before. We're going to do our first ever returns report this year. But these reach into the store. If you read our stuff, Brian mentioned earlier the retail apocalypse a few years ago that everyone was clamoring about. We never believed in that. We weren't popular at the time. And we're not popular now when we say that we believe that stores are going to be here for a long time and that Amazon is not going to steal everyone's lunch in every single capacity, because they're not. People like stores as a species. We like to shop. We're social. If we learned 1 or 2 things from the pandemic, it's that no one really the majority of folks do not just want to sit home and have everything delivered to them. We like to go out and engage and interact. So we're betting big on the store. We have not given up. And in fact, we're actually doubling down on the store. So it's going to be an enormous focus for us in the 12 months to come. It should also come as no surprise that there will be a couple of ways that we probe into the supply chain this year. What we really want to know most especially in the age of advanced or artificial intelligence, is how are the best retailers, what we call retail winners. And if you read our reports, you know that we're constantly teasing out the ways that winners do things differently. We want to know how the best retailers are making sense of the data that they have at hand. Because our consumer surveys, which we are also conducting in the background while we're conducting these retailer surveys, asking retailers, what do you think about your stores? Where are you planning to invest? We're also surveying retailers, our consumers, and asking them, what do you think about stores? And when we do this, we're very intentional in the fact that we ask about their favorite retailers. We do not ask them to just rate retail as a whole, or what's it like when you're forced to go to a store and you don't want to. We ask them to think about their very favorite retailer and think about things like, how good a job are they doing at providing you with products that you like? How good are they at messaging to you? How good are they at making sure that they're in stock on the products that you actually want? And what we find, and we've been conducting this type of research for a couple of years now, is that in 2023, we saw a real tipping point where consumers are running low on goodwill, even towards their favorite retailers. So retailers do not have an infinite amount of time to sort these things out. So we're going to dig into that. And of course, there's the unwavering impact of digital commerce. This will be thematic throughout a bunch of what we do this year. We want to help understand how the best retailers, again, are able to understand more about the customers who so far feel fairly disgruntled. The customers that we just talked about who said, I've been providing endless amounts of information about myself to retailers for years now, and they don't seem to be doing much that has a lot of value for me as a shopper with it. So we're going to figure out how are the best retailers able to stitch together ways to connect with consumers who so far had to stitch together the ways that they shop from retailers. And a lot of that has to do with marketing and messaging in the current environment. And again, would be remiss. We've been conducting an AI specific report since I think 2014 at this point. 2024 will be the first year we do not do an AI specific report. And our reason for that is very simple. We used to do a mobile specific report, and there just reached a point where mobile was no longer something that stood on its own and we could examine under a microscope. It became integrated into everything that retailers had to think about and do as they communicated and engaged with customers all along their shopping journeys. AI is there now. So we want to, in each one of these surveys that we're about to conduct in 2024, we're going to have a pointed line of inquiry around what AI's role is in a pragmatic way, not in a what could be done theoretically in 5 years, but how are analytics being used right now to make sense of all this, to make smarter decisions, to get to a next best action that makes the most sense for both retailer and the people that are shopping with them, with and without AI. And lastly, if you do read our stuff, you know that we ask in every single survey, what are the technologies that retailers are budgeting for? This is enormously instructive. And a lot of times we can sort of read the tea leaves by looking at where were budgets set aside for a particular technology a year ago and a year before that versus where they might be now. We do this in every report that we write, and it's really instructive to help give us an idea of where retailers are truly going, not what they talk about doing or what they might say is important to them, but really where they're putting their money. So as a result, without much further ado, these are the surveys that we know for sure we're going to conduct in 2024. We've reserved a couple spots for things that we don't know yet, but these are the ones that we know about. So the first, it should come as no surprise, is the store itself. This is a fairly generic store photo, and we chose that for a reason. Because as consumers, we all know if you were to visit stores today, which all of us do, they tend to look an awful lot like they did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, maybe longer. And that is because there's just not enough next generation technology been implemented by retailers for their own operations or to delight consumers. And we really hope this is a year where that changes. Brian shared some of the information around where retailers are budgeting for POS systems and making stores part of a more integrated, holistic, combination of phygital and digital worlds. We want to know what that looks like in true application. What are the technologies that have budget allocated right now? Are there certain technologies that are being planned to be ripped and replaced? Are there some that have been in sneaky little pilot programs for a while that they're planning to pour more money into? Those are the things we're going to want to know about the store because, as we say, it's a big deal for us. We have not given up on stores and we have no intention of doing so in the near future. But after that, Brian, I hand it over to you for the workforce.
First of all, I need to point out a buzzword alert: digital, the new word.
Digital. Digital.
I'm afraid we're all going to be plagued by that word for the next 12 to 18 months. We don't know who to blame for that, but we now have officially used it on a webinar. Good for you, Steve. Uh,
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about workforce. We're going to do a workforce management study this year, and the reason we're doing a workforce management study is because the last two have enlightened us about some big changes that are happening in the store place. The truth of the matter is that we've done workforce management solution or benchmarks off and on since our inception, since 2007. And around 2015 or 2016, we decided we weren't going to do anymore. And the reason we decided that is because nothing ever changed. Retailers told us consistently that they valued their employees as their most important asset, and yet none of their actions backed that up. They didn't spend enough on wages or benefits. They certainly didn't spend enough on training. And we gleaned from a lot of the data that we found that retailers were hoping to turn the staff over quicker than they had to give them raises. A pretty Machiavellian look at labor, at least in the United States. In 2017, we started to detect a little bit of a change. And by the time of the pandemic, the changes were huge. What was happening was, of course, first of all, the pandemic happened. And along with the pandemic, a huge bump of their employee base just retired. My age group, the people who were working in the stores just to earn a little bit of pin money, they decided they'd had enough, out they go. And that made room for a whole new generation of employees. The other thing that happened on the outside of the pandemic, at least in the US and to some extent in other parts of the world, the unemployment picture changed. Retailers traditionally do really well when unemployment is high because they can get people very easily. It's a good, steady job, hard work, not a lot of pay, but it's steady. When times are better, when the unemployment numbers are down, people ask more questions of retailers. And one of the things that the new generation of employees are asking retailers are what are their ethical standards? What are their career paths? What are the options for them going forward? How much are they going to get in training? Is there any opportunity for them for advancement? And one of the most important things is as new employees expect to be able to use the same technologies that they use in their lives, in their jobs. And this is very similar to the feedback that we're getting from consumers as well. Anything that they can experience in their lives, they also want to experience in the store. It makes perfect sense. And this is why there's such a focus on technology enablement in aisle, in the places where the employees are working and the consumers are shopping. And we're expecting to see big changes, of course, in the store report, but we're also expecting to see big changes in how employers and employees interact with each other in the digital domain while they're working primarily on the shop floor. We've seen some huge changes. We expect to see more, and we think this is a really important area for us to focus on. How about the next one, Steve? The supply chain. I get to talk about this. I was a CIO for a lot of years. And even before those times, I, like most retail technologists, spent a lot of time on the supply chain. And the reason is obvious, because the supply chain is where the profitability is built into any retailer. So we tended to have the biggest part of our investment was always in supply chain. I've already mentioned to you that there's a heightened awareness of the things that retailers need to hear from their supply chain as it's working. And that has given rise to a whole new generation of technologies that we would ubiquitously call the Internet of Things. But what it's really all about is real-time visibility into the supply chain so that you can make decisions quickly when things go wrong. And this is all about agility, resilience, and of course, the fact that we're moving from fairly simplistic chains to very complex supply networks. Retailers understand these challenges and they're working to solve them. And this is really very much a story that's still in motion, and we want to understand where they are and where they're going. So that's all about the supply chain.
Yeah. And we're going to do a commerce report, which is something that is an evolution of what we used to do, which was an e-commerce report. We've used the tagline, we've used Phygital now. There's no turning back.
No turning back.
But the truth of the matter is there are enormous lessons that we can expose. We feel that we can expose by querying retailers about what their blended commerce strategies look like right now and where they hope to take them in the next 12 to 18 months. So while, we will absolutely set up a way of parsing this data based on how many stores or what percentage of store-based versus online commerce retailers are engaged in, and then do a compare and contrast. So how are e-commerce retailers differing on one tactic versus those who have to also operate in the physical world as well? It's a new report for us. We're really excited about it. And it happens just about the time that we'll all be heading to the Shop Talk show. So the idea, well, as you might imagine, the idea with a lot of these things is to line them up as so that they time with important industry events. And the Shop Talk event, which used to just be a pure line e-commerce show, has clearly blended. This report will blend as well. So that's the commerce report. The other side of that is a customer satisfaction report. This is a customer experience report, is what we're titling it. This will be yet another of the 360-degree survey that we run this year, where we will survey typically about 100 retailers and ask them, how do you think that you're doing on any number of applications across the retail enterprise? How do you think you're doing on messaging to consumers? How do you think you're doing in stores? How do you think you're doing in providing people with products that they find interesting and valuable and relevant to their lives? And then we'll turn around and we'll ask 1,000 consumers very similar things, again, in the vein of how their best and most favorite retailers are responding to these challenges. Last year, when we did this one, it was a bit of an eye opener. The chasm that is growing between retailers' confidence and consumers' dissatisfaction is bordering on what we would call resentment. Consumers used to feel, and we can say this with some level of authority because we've been conducting this report for a number of years now and doing it in this he said, she said format. Consumers used to apply a lot more apathy to their favorite retailers when they were out of stock. Well, I can't get it right all the time, but I'll still stick with them. I'll give them another chance. Or they might not be selling the most believable, environmentally sustainable story, but I know they'll get there someday, so I'm going to hang in there. Those days are rapidly waning. And what we're finding is because retailers have spent the last few years not living up to their promises in some of these areas, consumers are much more likely to say, I gave you a chance, you didn't capitalize upon it. I don't feel really any measure of guilt anymore about taking my business elsewhere to someone who can absolutely fulfill every single time in a way that meets my demands. And more often than not, that tends to be an online pure play retailer like Amazon. So this report is going to be really instructive for us as far as how things are moving directionally, because just from 2019 to 2021 to 2023, we've seen an enormous shift here. And what really the takeaway from these reports tends to be, the retailers are running out of time to get some of these things right. The other thing that comes out of them is what consumers tell us is they don't need to get it right, but they do need to show that they're trying in any of these areas, whether it's the products they sell being environmentally, good for the people who are making them, or the amount of carbon that's required to get these products to my doorstep. So there is still room to play with, and we want to expose where those real areas of opportunity are and where time is really running out. So that's the customer experience report. After that,
I love these shopping bags. They look pretty
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Well, for the last couple of years, we've been asked to do studies regarding the holiday events and whether or not they're still effective. The last study we did, which just came out this year, told us a couple of interesting things. First of all, it told us that these big one-time events like Black Friday and Cyber Monday will continue for some time to come. Although they are no longer single day or 2 or 3 day events, they tend to be almost seasonal events. We all know that companies like Walmart actually have their Black Friday sales sometimes start in July of all time. So it's more of a concept than a day, but it still is very popular with consumers, and therefore it is still done by retailers. One of the interesting insights we found out is that retail winners, overperformers, are very, very good at making these things profitable opportunities for them. Whereas average and underperformers, they're not very good at all. They do them because they feel they have to. And they view it at best as an opportunity to get rid of overstocks. So this is not the best. This is not the best approach, in our opinion. Retail winners know how to glean profits from these hyper sales days and to turn them into opportunities to build loyalty. At the same time, we have seen that both consumers and retailers are moving in the direction of providing more relevant and personalized value via their digital domain. So, for example, making offers to Steve because Steve likes certain things and he's a good shopper and he's a loyal customer. Therefore, we're going to put some value into his hands that makes sense for him, particularly that might not make sense to me. This notion of personalized value presentation is growing in importance. And of course, this goes back to why we're going to be studying marketing at some point in the year. All of this is really important. The fact is that consumers, remember, they don't see any distinction between their physical experience and their digital experience. It's all one. Either you solve your problem or you don't. And these shopping events play a big, big part of that as consumers wind up for end of year celebrations.
Well, you mentioned marketing, Brian, and
It
that
is
is
right there, yeah.
yet another 360-degree survey that we're going to be conducting in 2024. This image struck me as somewhat perfect. The amount of emails, text messages, uh, social media feed attempts is becoming overwhelming for most consumers. It's something they told us the last time we asked about retailers' marketing efforts a few years ago. We haven't touched it since. We're really eager to see where that tipping point is as it stands right now. There are very effective ways of connecting with consumers. And the one thing that consumers are really happy to tell us is what those ways might be on any number of given brands that they interact with. We want to find out what they are and share that back with retailers. This is much more about finding out what works than it is finding out what doesn't, because as shoppers, all of us know what doesn't work. And too many retailers are knowingly engaged in marketing practices right now that are just too deeply rooted in legacy. And this is how we've done it. And we have no idea if it works or not. We have no idea if it upsets people. We're just going to continue to inundate their inboxes and flood them with promotions that have either products that they don't care about, products that they've already purchased and don't need to purchase again, products that have absolutely no allure to them based on pricing, and on and on and on the list goes. So this is a marketing report. It's a little bit later in the year, but it's one that we're really excited about because we'll be able to determine both, what retailers are doing and what consumers are fairly loudly shouting, I wish you would do more of this instead. And that's the marketing report. And then the last one that we know for certain, Brian, is a brand new one for us.
Yeah, it's all about returns. Returns is getting to be a very, very big deal. And we all, as consumers, have engaged in a little bit of bad behavior since the beginning of e-commerce. I know in my family, when we buy a fashion, we're very likely to buy three of them or to order three of one. A size 4, a size 6, and a size 8. And we hope we fit into the size 6, but we might be an 8. We don't know. The problem with this kind of behavior, which is called bracketing, by the way, is that it takes 3 pieces of inventory out of circulation until the consumer makes their decision. And it's also very, very expensive for the retailer to take that return with RA return authorizations and the reverse logistics associated with that. So we know that this is becoming a big deal. We know that retailers are starting to push consumers towards returns in store. Lots of good reasons for that. Of course, by the way, that adds new value for the store. But the opportunities are, first of all, that you can replace the returned item with something else of equal or higher value. There's an upsell opportunity. There's an opportunity to engage with the consumer in a meaningful way. All of these seemingly attractive capabilities. However, how do you triage a return when it comes into a store? Do the employees know what to do with it? Those kinds of questions arise. A more important question might be, how do you prevent the returns from happening in the first place? Are there things that retailers can do with technology and information that lower the volume of returns rather than just making it tough? Why don't you just get rid of the causal issues that make the return happen in the first place? Should we offer free returns to some of our best customers, but charge for returns from other customers? Should we encourage or discourage it? All of these things are really kind of information-driven conversations, and we know that retailers are having them. So we want to study it. We want to understand where their minds are going, how they're investing, and whether the solutions they're choosing are effective or not. And we're very excited about this. It's the first time we've teased returns out of the general discussion of what goes on in the store, but we think it's important enough to elevate it to its own benchmark.
Yeah, we sure do. So those are the topics that we know we're going to do, we're going to conduct. I mentioned a couple times here that we like to reserve placeholders for custom research. Custom research can be a scary word. We promise that it's not in our world. What it essentially means is that we reserve the right to call it audible and throw in some things that we might not have predicted would be a hot topic for us, 6, 8 months prior. So typically we reserve 2 slots. And we ask everyone here to let us know, what did we miss? Some of the most interesting research we've ever done has come from the community. There have been ideas that people have thrown to us about, wow, wouldn't it be great to know what's going on with location analytics? Or, how do you determine whether a store is healthy or not? Or what are the best home delivery options look like right now? Interesting versions of last mile fulfillment, and so on and so forth. We actually just conducted a private survey for a customer about the increasing role of Wi-Fi in stores, and it was eye-opening for us. Retailers think about Wi-Fi a lot more than we thought they did, and they know that their next purchase needs to be their last for a while. So we're open to suggestions. You might notice that some of the things that are absent this year, we don't have a slot reserved for a sustainability report. We have our reasons for that, but we would like to hear if we're wrong. We conduct a sustainability report on and off and have been. It was one of the first topics we ever studied way back in 2008. At the time, the one thing that we were told pretty loudly was retailers didn't care, right? Unless it saved them money on their HVAC or their electricity costs in their stores, then they were not interested in telling a story. Now, throughout the years, that story has evolved from, well, if it can save us money, that's one thing. What if it tells us a story that we can tell to try to get more people through the door? We don't really care if we have a real story to back it up or real data to back it up. We just need a story to tell. To now, they're being dragged along by consumers, and they recognize that consumers are demanding more sustainable products, products that are made more ethically, sourced more ethically, provide a higher quality of living for the people that are making them, and so on and so forth. Is this the year that we should dig into that again? Or was the one that we conducted 2 years ago sufficient enough to tide us over? We don't know. Let us know. Maybe this is the year that we need to be conducting a data privacy and security report. Again, an intermittent topic that's come and gone. It's a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, but the pace of change here has proven to be slow enough that we don't need to touch it every year. Should 2024 be a year? And the same goes for loss prevention. Now, we mentioned at the top of this presentation that loss prevention stories are absolutely capitalizing a great deal of headlines being written about retail this year. Are some of them, the result of the fact that everyone has cameras on their phone and is able to catch bad behavior? Has loss prevention really increased that much in this country and overseas? We'd like to hear from you. Maybe that's a topic we should be touching this year. But again, there are things that we know we don't know, and we invite everyone to reach out and let us know, hey, you're all wet here, or hey, we think you're on the right line, but we need to dig a little further. And then there are the truly custom options. And these comes in all kinds of various formats. Most of these are available on our website. We've done retailer website evaluation where we went out and shopped 100 different retailers year over year and determined how well their site adapted to things like loading photos and presenting video and product detail pages and things of that nature. We've done the same thing for gift cards. We've done the same thing for the personalization of digital offerings. They're fun work. They're things we would never think to do until a client comes to us and says, hey, we have an idea. We'd love to get an objective third party to conduct the actual research. So we're always willing to entertain those. Again, some really fun work has come out of it in the past. We've done some geographical comparisons. Some of these tend to be really big in scope. We did one a few years ago for PayPal, where we essentially rated what are the differences from one country to another and wild swings from places like Brazil and Russia to Germany and Canada with what shoppers do when there's a long store line. And the data proved to be really fascinating. It turns out cultural implications are fairly strong, and there are massive differences between what people do when there's a long line in Japan versus what they do when there's a long line in, say, Mexico. And then we offer what is the truly custom research that is intended for internal use only. A lot of times technologists will come to us and say, there's something that we're dying to know that we do not want our competitors to know. Can you help us? And the answer is always, yeah, we will absolutely help you. Sometimes that's, SWOT analysis. Sometimes it's looking at the retail landscaping and figuring out how to tell when a particular retailer might be ready to hear a solid pitch or when they might be ready to hear a true conversation about engaging. And a lot of times that involves maturity models and scorecards. Brian and I are in the throes of one of these right now, and they're fascinating work, and no two are the same. And as I said just a moment ago, they're some of the most engaging work for us, and the pricing isn't as scary as you might think it is. Um, but the point of all of these things, really, at the end of the day, no matter whether it's a custom bit of research or it's just something that we're doing from an evaluation point of view, is we are here to advise technology companies to help them align what they're saying to the market based on what the market tells us. And that's the beauty of our model, is that we have retailers incessantly feeding us data about what matters most to them, what they plan to spend on, what they need those technologies to look like, and then a community of technologists who, in this day and age, are incredibly advanced. And oftentimes their message is just getting lost in the way that they're positioning it. And that's what we aim to do. So if you've engaged with us, perhaps in the past, a lot of people like to refer to us as their best kept secret because we help them make their mistakes in private, as Brian likes to say, or as I like to say, we're just an expert set of eyes. But no matter what, all these options are always available, and we're incredibly flexible. We pride ourselves on our flexibility. There's really no a la carte menu here. So here's the agenda for the things that we know we're going to do. Talked about some of the slots that were reserved for custom work and for custom projects as well. But here's the timeline. You'll notice there's a few months between when each survey launches and when we release the reports. The reports themselves are always available for free. We don't collect downloaders. We don't have any sort of quid pro quo for reading our insights. We like to make our insights available to the entire community at whole. So this is what we plan to study. If you have opinions and you think that there are things I said that we've missed or that we should dig deeper into, please, we welcome your feedback. One of the ways to reach out to us is our Director of Business Development. That's Linda Wolf. Her contact is right here. The other is across all of the different areas where we exist. We don't do a lot on Facebook, full disclosure. We're fairly active on LinkedIn. We don't do a lot on Twitter. And always, you can just reach us by direct email. So, Brian, I see that we have a couple of questions that have come in
Yeah,
here
we
that I'd love
do.
to.
We do.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was one question and a comment really from one of our listeners who said that pricing and sustainability are really, really important in her opinion. We happen to
Mhm.
agree with that. Let's talk
Yeah.
about pricing first. We have done a couple, in the past 3 years, we've done two bespoke studies on price optimization. They've been for internal use only with our client. We would love to do a public study on the effect of pricing. For example, is dynamic pricing finally going to have its day? Are ESLs finally happening? What's going on there? How does the Internet of Things affect the technologies that can enable these kinds of very fast moving price changes? What about optimization itself? Is as new analytics capabilities have come to the forefront, new ways to optimize price have presented themselves. Is localization real? What do we, from a pricing perspective, do we need to talk about that? We want to talk about all of those things, and we'd be thrilled to have somebody work with us. So if pricing is your thing, and you want to find out what the market is really thinking about the capabilities and limitations of pricing technologies, let's talk. Let's get together and think about how we
Yeah.
can address the problem. Sustainability is a bigger issue. We have wanted to do another sustainability study for as long as I can remember, but at least for the last 10 years. The problem is sustainability has many, many different angles. Are we talking about the carbon footprint? Are we talking about ethical sourcing of merchandise? Are we talking about, as Steve mentioned, keeping the lights low and the refrigeration high? What about last mile optimization? What about all of those things from a sustainability perspective? We've been asking customers about sustainability for a while now in our customer studies, and one of the things we found out is that consumers' awareness of sustainability issues is coming up. It's raising. A couple of years ago, the first time we asked, consumers told us that sustainability to them meant two things. First of all, if it's something I put in my mouth, I care. Or if it's something I put on my baby's body, I care. In other areas, they really didn't. It was kind of shocking. However, when we asked the same question again this year, we got a different answer. So consumers' awareness of issues related to sustainability and ethical sourcing, work environment standards, all of those interesting aspects to it, it's coming up. It's coming into focus. And because of that, retailers are paying attention. So if sustainability is your thing, regardless of the angle, and you want to explore it more from the consumer point of view and from the retailer point of view, we would love to work with you. So please just pick up the phone or just drop us a line on email and we'll follow right up with you.
Yeah, it's a
Thanks.
perfect way. Yeah, it's a perfect way of putting it because, left unto itself, we will absolutely go far too wide. We need a narrower conversation around what sustainability means for retailers and for consumers themselves. So excellent feedback, folks. I think that does it for us today. We said we'd try to do it in about 45 minutes. We actually stuck to script there. So I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy schedule. We know there are lots of places you could have been today, and you chose to spend some time with us. So we hope as a result of that, there was a lot of value in this. And again, this is just the beginning of the conversation. We welcome feedback and ideas and suggestions here at RSR. So with that, we'll send along the slides next week and thank everyone for spending some time with us here today.